113 Questions About Evolution with John Perry. Evolutionary question number 22. Did the coelacanth stop evolving? Now, the title of today's video is a little bit of me just kind of trolling other science educators, because you really shouldn't say, did the coelacanth stop evolving? Coelacanths aren't just one thing, they're not just one species, it's an entire order of species. Only 2 species of coelacanth are known today, but in the past there were lots of them and they were very diverse. And then, of course, the answer to our question, did coelacanths stop evolving? The answer to that is no. Everything alive is evolving. Everything is subject to descent with modification acted upon by natural selection. However, it is true to say that coelacanths are in what is called phenotypic stasis. They are not changing in body shape very much over the years. And especially if we compare them to mammals, they haven't changed much at all since the extinction of the dinosaurs. So today we're going to talk about why that is. Today's full question comes in from Atif, and I edited this a little bit just for length, but he says, "Hi John, I hope you're doing well. I am from Pakistan and I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for it. I have many questions, but let me just start off with the following. Why didn't coelacanths or lobe-finned fish or any other species of antiquity evolve for all these millions of years? They have evolved, but not as much as you would expect given the period that they have been extant for. Thank you. Regards, Atif." Well, this question is really cool. If you've noticed, in the introduction to the 113 Questions About Evolution, I actually have the coelacanth as one of these animals that's significant to evolutionary theory. The coelacanth is an example of a lobe-finned fish, and lobe-finned fish helped us kind of piece together how it was that arms and legs evolved. Lobe-finned fish have pectoral fins and pelvic fins that are very arm and leg-like. And we can see when we look at how lobe-finned fish use those fins, we can see that they use them for really fancy maneuvering in the water. So here's a coelacanth doing his thing. If you watch this too long, you'll get dizzy and puke. But the pectoral fins are homologous to our arms, and the pelvic fins are homologous to our legs. Those fins are on fleshy stalks, and being on fleshy stalks, they can move with incredible maneuverability, and they can really outmaneuver other types of species. And from this, it's not too hard to see how you can get something that evolves into something like an arm or a leg. Here is a coelacanth. There are the lobes, and these things went all out on the lobes during evolution. So they've actually got, they got 2 pectoral fins, then 2 pelvic fins, which are the ones in green there. The pink one there is an anal fin. That's also on a lobe. The tail, you could argue, is also on a lobe. It's got a lobe at the end of the tail. And then there's a lobe on the second dorsal fin on the top. So the front dorsal fin does not have a lobe, but the second one does. So they've got a lot of lobes, these coelacanths, and they're very good at maneuvering. Now, lobe-finned fish are in contrast to rayfinned fish. Rayfinned fish just have these, rays, these little, tiny little bones that form their fins that stick out of kind of a nub. It's bone and muscle, or cartilage and muscle, but it's embedded in the flesh. You don't have the lobe there. So that's the big difference anatomically. And these 2 groups of fishes, they diverged from each other before animals crawled out on land, or at least vertebrates crawled out on land. So their divergence was very, very ancient. Ray fins have had ray fins ever since that divergence. Lobe fins have maintained their lobe fins since that divergence. Now, Tiktaalik and, these early vertebrates that came out on land, maybe there were some before Tiktaalik even, they were lobe-finned fish. So actually, I said earlier that there's only 8 species of lobe-finned fish alive today. It's not totally true, because all land vertebrates are technically within the lobe-finned fish clade. We are, if you want to talk this way, we are really weird lobe-finned fish. Now, about the speed of evolution. Here we have, on the right, we have a Cretaceous coelacanth, and on the left, we have a Cretaceous mammal. So both of these animals lived at the same time as the dinosaurs. And since that time, since the extinction of the dinosaurs, mammals have exploded in diversity. We have, thousands of species. You've got things as weird and big as elephants and things as bizarre as bats. Bats can fly. So from these Cretaceous mammals, we got amazing diversity and evolutionary just innovation. But then in coelacanths, the two species of modern coelacanth look superficially like their extinct Cretaceous cousins. Why is that? I would want to point out, though, that I've kind of cherry-picked the mammal world. There are a lot of things that still look like those ancient mammals, a lot of shrews and so on. But still, even though I've cherry-picked, mammals are crazy, right? So, hey, coelacanth, what's the deal? Come on, man. Coelacanths are so similar to their ancient, fossils that they're often referred to as living fossils. I cannot remember where I got this picture of this guy, this man going on a walk with his pet fish in the forest. When the coelacanth was discovered that there was still a species of coelacanth alive, there's actually 2 species of coelacanth alive today, it was just awesome. Everyone's like, whoa, it's a living fossil. That term living fossil, it really bothers people these days. In fact, there are scientific papers saying that we should stop calling them living fossils because when you tell the general public that the coelacanth is a living fossil, what a lot of people think is that coelacanths have not evolved at all. Like the modern coelacanth is exactly like the extinct coelacanth. And really, to the untrained eye, they do look the same. This paper right here is one paper that goes over the changes in coelacanths and argues that we should stop calling them living fossils. Now, Darwin is the one who coined this term, living fossils, and I see the use of it. I'm not going to say who I side with. I haven't really made a decision as to whether or not we should stop using this word, but this paper says we shouldn't. And they show in the coelacanths here, we've got the modern coelacanth on the left, and its closest relative in the fossil record during the Cretaceous on the right. Again, it does take, you have to kind of be trained to know how different they are. Here I've got the fossil coelacanth next to the modern coelacanth, and they look the same to the untrained eye. But here on the left, I've got a dog and a raccoon, and they also look the same to the untrained eye. I mean, they're nearly identical so far as the average Joe can tell. In this paper, they point out that in the past, coelacanths were a very diverse group. And they show this drawing, which shows a bunch of different species, this chart on the right. It shows, the overall body shape of various different species, and then it shows, actually, their genre of coelacanth. And then it shows, the body size. So some of them are like 0.3 meters, some are, what's the biggest one is over 2 meters. They get pretty big and pretty small. Rebelatrix, for example, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it appears to have been highly adapted for high-speed swimming. So it's this guy with the pointy tail that's drawn in this beautiful painting here on the left. That thing, we think, was probably hunting high-speed pursuit, kind of like a tuna fish is today. They used to be a very diverse group. This isn't one of the super high-speed ones, but this one probably was more of a high-speed predator than the modern coelacanth, which basically just drifts around. And here's one of the older groups that's, some people group it in with coelacanths, some people group it as the sister clade to coelacanths. Again, according to this paper, they're like, look, coelacanths have evolved. Okay, I get it. But why didn't they evolve very much compared to mammals, right? Mammals have evolved tremendously over that same amount of time. Why haven't the coelacanths? The answer to this is that under most conditions, natural selection maintains phenotypic stasis. And phenotypic stasis is kind of a fancy word. Phenotype just means like the shape of an organism. So phenotype is different than genotype. So the genes of an animal, the sequence of DNA that an organism has, that's its genotype. But the actual shape, overall shape and traits of an organism, that's what we call the phenotype. And it's important to distinguish genotype from phenotype because genes can actually evolve a lot while natural selection is maintaining a very stable overall shape and stable number of traits that the organism has. You can actually have quite a bit of dancing that goes on under the hood, but the end result is the same. So the genotype can evolve a lot while the phenotype stays the same. And this is what we see when we look at the 2 different species of coelacanth alive today. Their genes are evolving, but their phenotype is pretty much staying the same. They are in a state of phenotypic stasis. Stasis, of course, means that it's staying the same. One of the best ways to see why it is that this happens, why it is that sometimes a species will get trapped with a specific phenotype, even for millions of years, is to look at fitness landscapes, which are models of how it is that evolution works. Fitness landscape models were first developed by Sewall Wright in 1932. I hope I'm saying his name right. His models were pretty sophisticated, and nowadays they're much more sophisticated still. I'm going to show you a super simplified cartoon version of a fitness landscape. This is a falcon that I drew up here, and we're going to look at the fitness landscape of this falcon. And what has just happened is falcons normally eat small birds, but we're going to suppose here, little mind experiment, we're going to suppose that all of the birds in North America went extinct except for falcons. So here on the y-axis, the vertical axis, we have fitness of falcon. That's what we're measuring there, 1 through 6. I'm not giving units to those numbers, it's just 1 through 6. And then from left to right, we have falcon body size, and that's 1 through 9. So this falcon, there's no more birds for it to eat, so it has to eat mammals. Falcons today, they will eat mammals from time to time, but they prefer birds. Well, these are the mammals that I'm going to say are available to this falcon. So we've got mice, rats, rabbits, and goats. This is what the fitness landscape might look like for these falcons. So the little gold blobs here, those represent the falcon population. So there's, each one of those globs might represent a couple hundred birds. And they are of a particular size. That is the size that they started out with. And we can see that if they were size number 2, they'd be doing really good because they could perfectly hunt rats. If they were size number 5, they'd be doing even better because they could hunt rabbits. If they happened to be size 8, they'd be doing really, really well because they could hunt these goats. And apparently in this thought experiment, there's a lot of goats and, not nearly as many rats. This population is going to gradually evolve as the generations go on. And we're going to see that natural selection pulls things up the closest possible slope from their starting position. Natural selection is blind. It would be great for these falcons to evolve body size number 8, but that's not possible from where we're starting because we're next to the rats and we're leaning up the rat hill, and that's the way that natural selection is going to pull us. Natural selection maximizes fitness, but it can only do so blindly. Which way are we going to go? We're going to go up the rabbit or the rat? Well, we're kind of leaning up the rat already by default, so that's the way we're going to go. And now we cannot get to the rabbit from here. We're just blindly going up, and we have reached the top. We're peeking over a little bit into the mice, but because natural selection is so blind, it's actually going to sit there on top of the rats until the rat population declines. Once the rat population declines, then we can start moving up the mice hill. Get some momentum there. And then we're going to just kind of park out up there, and we will be stuck there forever unless the environment changes or there's some sort of strange mutation in the falcons that opens up a whole new situation for them. So, supposing that all else stays the same, small body size is what's going to evolve in this scenario that we set up for this falcon. And by the way, I'm faking this. I just drew something that would look cool, and we just totally a thought experiment. But in real fitness landscapes, there are these mathematical equations. The equation itself figures out where the population is going to end up settling. Anyway, let's scratch that scenario, start a slightly different scenario. Let's say that we have a much larger population of falcons, and they're leaning on the rabbits, and they're also leaning on the rats, and the population is physically huge, and there are some pockets of the population that don't communicate with other populations. So there's physical barriers between different groups. If you have physical barriers between different groups within the population, you can actually get the population to split, and part of it will start evolving towards rabbits in this case, the other towards rats. So that's what's going to happen here. We now have 2 populations. They are still the same species at this point, but they are diverging in size. And if they ever do meet up again and mate, their children, who end up being kind of in between small and big, they're going to be sitting at the bottom of this landscape. They're not going to survive very well. This is the very beginnings of a speciation event. And now we're settled up on top of the rabbits here. We got a nice, the perfect size, body size 5. We're hovering around that for our large population of falcons. But the rabbits are going to respond to this by, the smaller ones dying and the larger ones surviving and having babies. So actually the rabbit population is going to change, and that's going to make the falcons have to change as well. This is an evolutionary arms race between falcon and rabbit. Both are increasing in size. And the goat is starting to get nervous over here because, what are you doing, rabbit? You're bringing me a new villain. Thank you so very much. This continues, and goats now hate rabbits because now the goats' babies are getting eaten. And look, now even some of the goats' older young, are getting eaten by falcons. And oh, look, now adult goats are getting eaten by giant falcons. So that's how these fitness landscapes work. And you probably noticed that things tend to get perched on the peak of a fitness landscape, and they just stay there. And they really do stay there. I mean, obviously, in real life, the landscape itself is fairly dynamic. Things are bouncing around a bit. But natural selection is an optimizer. And the things that keep the population at the top of the fitness peak, those things are competition and mutation rate. Competition between other members of their own species and competition between other predators, different species. That's what's keeping them at the top of this fitness peak. Any mutation to the left, any mutation to the right, those are damaging to the animals that possess them, and so they don't pass on very many offspring. Mutation rates also affect how tightly a species gets stuck at the top of a fitness peak, but I won't go into the details of that right now. There are two main ways to get off of a fitness landscape and start evolving again and diverging and actually splitting into new species. One of those is an adaptive breakthrough. So let's suppose here that this little guy develops an immunity to snake venom. Well, that will dramatically change the fitness landscape for this species. They can now eat snakes. There's no longer any really solid pressure on body size. There's lots of different sized snakes. And so you can see that under this scenario, the body size trait might start evolving all over the place because these things are now specializing in eating snakes of all shapes and sizes. So that's one way to break free from a peak, is a crazy adaptive breakthrough. Another way, scratch that, is for the environment to dramatically change. And the most dramatic change in an environment is a mass extinction. And so here we have everything has now gone extinct except for one species or one population of falcons, and they're all, eating bugs and sometimes even plants, rotting carcasses, you name it. Life just got really, really, really rough. During an extinction event and after an extinction event, the fitness landscape, it isn't just flat and it doesn't just stay still. It's bouncing all over the place. It's a lot of luck as to who survives and who doesn't. Whoever does survive, they will end up evolving all over the place. It's pretty much just true random evolution happening at this point. But eventually, the ecosystems will start to come back together, and little fitness peaks will start to stabilize. And when they do, this species that survived the extinction event has now spread out phenotypically all over the place, and there's going to be rapid speciation. That is one way to escape phenotypic stasis. Now, back to our coelacanth. The coelacanth appears to be stuck on a fitness peak, and it's been stuck since the Cretaceous. And if we look at this chart, we see, or we can kind of get some ideas as to why that might be, actually, is what I should say. We know that the reason things stop evolving phenotypically is because they get stuck on the tops of fitness landscapes. But it's really hard to tell exactly why they're stuck on the top of a fitness landscape. So now I'm going to go into speculation mode. All right, so take all of this with a grain of salt. Lobefinned fish, if you look at their history, they emerge in the Devonian, and they do okay for a while, and then they really shrink towards the end of the Permian. Then there's an extinction event that wipes out a lot of fish, and then lobefinned fish diversify after that, a fair amount. including coelacanths, and then they start to narrow as rayfinned fish start to expand. And then these charts, by the way, you need to take with a grain of salt as well. You're basing it off of fossils, and the fossil record is spotty. But it seems like lobefinned fish took a hit during the end of the Cretaceous. And it looks like what might have been happening is they were outcompeted by rayfinned fishes. So after that big extinction event, when there was this incredible opportunity to diverge, the rayfinned fish diverged first and put a bunch of competition pressure on coelacanths and other lobefinned fish. They weren't able to diverge. One of the fun things to think about is, why is it that rayfinned fish did so good? Why did they outcompete everything else? You can actually see at the end of the Triassic, if you look at the fossil record, that they start winning. They start diverging and taking over. And people have speculated as to why that is. Like, what was it that rayfinned fish hit on that made them so successful? The most obvious candidate is this ability right here. They can shoot their mouths forward. If you were to see them hunt with this structure, this puckering face, you wouldn't be able to see it. It'd be like lightning speed. They do it super quick. But what happens is when they open their mouth, they suck in and then they push their face out at the same time, and they're able to suck up their prey super, super efficiently. And coelacanths never evolved this ability. This evolved twice in two different species of rayfinned fish, and those species ended up just exploding and diverging into thousands of other species. And today, pretty much all the modern rayfinned fish, not all of them, but a lot of them, are descendants of one of those two original species, and they have this ability or some modified version of it. They are by far the most successful types of fish on Earth today. But the coelacanths still have one edge over those rayfinned fish, and that is that they can maneuver super, super well. So if we look at coelacanths on a fitness landscape during the Cretaceous, down here on the bottom I have maneuverability on the left and speed on the right. That's the trait from left to right that we're measuring. And then I've got the fitness. I still wrote fitness of falcon on the side there. That should be fitness of coelacanth. But here we have everyone doing pretty well. They're all on their little fitness landscapes. And then the rayfinned fish come in with their super fancy mouths and start competing. And what does that do? Well, that narrows and lowers the fitness landscapes of everybody who's alive. The mediocre guy in the middle, he's going first. He's on the way out here. And he just got pushed to extinction. And our really high-speed coelacanth, he's also not doing so well. He can't compete quite as well with these rayfinned fish. Some of them are also really fast, and they have this crazy mouth. And so, look, he's going extinct as well. And our highly maneuverable coelacanth, still hanging in there, but that spike is now very, very narrow. This coelacanth must maintain high maneuverability. Any mutation to the left or to the right that lowers that high maneuverability, that is fatal. And so with all of this competition all around, it cannot change. It is stuck on a fitness peak and it cannot get off. So there we have it. Still there even today. Again, I want to point out that I'm saying that maneuverability is the thing keeping the coelacanth alive, but that is speculation. What we can say with a high degree of confidence is that the reason the coelacanth has not evolved is because for some reason it is stuck on a fitness peak. So that video was a little bit longer than I normally like to make these, but I love this topic, and I really like looking at and thinking about fitness landscapes. Now, I will do a video in the future just on fitness landscapes, because in reality, they're not so cartoony and silly as the ones that I showed here. Atif, my friend from Pakistan, I hope that my answer was helpful for you. So long for this week, everyone. Next question. Coelacanth? More like Coela can't really evolve very much. Am I right? Okay, bye.